Welcome to MrMaple.com video. MrMaple.com is a mail-order business owned by brothers Matthew and Timothy Nichols, who are extremely passionate about Japanese maples. Please watch these videos and share our passion with us. And feel free to go to MrMaple.com and check through the wonderful selection of rare and interesting and exceptional Japanese maples that you can mail order on MrMaple.com. Today's episode of Mr. Maple Video is on Japanese maples for the winter garden.
Welcome to Mr. Maple Video. I'm Matt Nichols of MrMaple.com, a mail order business that does over 1,000 different varieties of Japanese maples. Today we're going to talk about some winter interest trees. And you may be thinking with Japanese maples, spring interest, fall colors, or just a little past those fall colors, or we're going to look at some trees that really light up the winter landscape. When looking for winter interest, what people often think about are the barks. So the barks of these trees have some really nice colors. When everything's out of leaf and your garden may be a little bit more drab, these maples can actually put a lot of color in there. Contrast with conifers, some other small plants, and really bring about a really nice four-season feel to your garden. Now, maples really have spectacular colors. The most commonly known are the coral barks. They have that more of that red tint to them. But we're actually going to get into some yellows, some oranges, and even some of the paper bark interest today to talk a little bit about the diversity that shows up in maples for the winter garden.
Hello and welcome to Mr. Maple Video. I'm Tim Nichols of MrMaple.com. We do over 1,000 different varieties of Japanese maples, and today we're going to talk about the winter interest garden. There's a lot of plants that can be added to the winter interest garden, but the most spectacular are maples. We're going to talk about 10 different varieties of maples that have a unique interest in the winter garden. Here we have Acer palmatum winter red. This Japanese maple gets its name from this spectacular bright red bark that gets more and more intense as the winter approaches. This makes it an excellent plant for the winter garden because it'll have the brightest red bark of almost any of the Japanese maples. The foliage in the spring is a bright chartreuse green, turns to a yellow in the fall, and this is a great mid-sized tree that will end up reaching 10 to 12 feet. So it's not your really, really large coral bark, and it's not your dwarf, it's a great mid-sized one that fits in a lot of people's landscapes. Another maple with a unique bark interest is a snake bark maple called Erythrocladum. It's a mouthful to say, but it's a beautiful tree. It has a large chartreuse green leaf in the spring, gives a great contrast against this bright orange bark. Midsummer, the bark actually goes to a yellow. So during the summer you have a yellow bark interest, and during the winter you have an orange bark interest. This is a snake bark maple, which means that you have these white striations throughout the bark. It makes this plant almost have the snake-like appearance. And this tree will have a semi-cascading habit. So it'll be upright and the branches will arch out. This gives it a really unique habit and will really add that unique texture, shape, and color in the winter garden. Here we have Acer palmatum bihu. This is a recent introduction from Japan that has bright yellow bark. Instead of a coral bark, you have a bright yellow bark. It makes a great contrast in there with a lot of the other Japanese maples, and really will just light up the winter garden. This tree also has bright chartreuse green leaves in the early spring, turns to bright yellow in the fall, but this bark here is just simply phenomenal, and it's something that will add a lot of interest, and it really will be a great talking point in your garden. Here we have a brand new introduction called Acer palmatum Wildfire. This tree gets its name because the bark at the base is a bright yellow as it matures to an orange in the middle and red on the tip, so it looks like a wildfire. Fall colors are bright yellow in the fall. The spring leaves are a bright chartreuse green. This is a plant that provides year-round interest and a really unique and very different selection, as you've got that full spectrum of colors of yellows, oranges to reds on a mature tree from the bottom to the top. This is a plant that will really add a lot of shock and awe. The next tree we've got here, this is Acer palmatum Little Sango. This is the dwarf coral bark selection. There's actually an introduction by one of our friends, Talon Buckholtz. It'll end up getting, we project right around 4 to 5 feet, maybe 6 feet. but it'll be very, very dense and multi-stemming. Excellent for container plants, excellent for small spaces in the landscape. Provide that bright coral bark, but in a smaller space. If you're looking for a small space and you're wanting a coral bark, this is the Japanese maple for you. It's called Little Sango. It's a dwarf coral bark Japanese maple. Our next Japanese maple is a Japanese maple introduction from Texas. Yes, that's right. This is a tree that's extremely, extremely heat tolerant. It can handle full sun in more of your temperate climates. This is Japanese maple. It's called Acer palmatum Baton Rouge. With a name like Baton Rouge, you'd think that this Japanese maple was an introduction from Louisiana. But the name Baton Rouge actually translates as red stick or red twig, which actually is a great way to describe this tree because of its bright, bright red twigging that you see during the winter. This Japanese maple provides a great winter interest. In the spring, this tree leaves out with a little bit of a purple border to it with green leaves. Midsummer it'll be a green, and in the fall, this coral bark Japanese maple is unique in that it actually turns to a red in the fall. You know, if you've got a southwest exposure and some of the hotter climates in the south, this is an excellent Japanese maple that'll perform great for you in the landscape. Here we have Acer griseum, the paper bark maple. Acer griseum gets its name, the paper bark maple, because of its exfoliating, deep, rich chocolate bark that exfoliates here, which provides a unique winter interest. Acer griseum has a compound leaf that's trifoliate. In the early spring, that's a rich green. Fall colors are a bright red. This is a maple that's highly sought after worldwide by collectors and gardeners. It's a plant that you'll definitely enjoy in the winter garden. Today we've talked about coral bark Japanese maples with yellow bark, and even paper bark Japanese maples. Our next tree that we're going to talk about is Shidava Gold, that has features of bright lime green bark. Shidava Gold gets its name for its bright, bright, bright golden yellow fall color, but its bright lime green bark is definitely a unique interest. It provides a lot of great winter interest. I like planting these near the coral barks and the yellow bark Japanese maples because they provide a lot of great contrast. Shidava Gold leaves out in the spring with that bright lime green leaves, which really just makes the whole tree just look fluorescent in the spring. Shidava Gold was found as a witch's broom on a cultivar called aoyagi. This means that Shidava Gold is dwarf in habit and fits in small spaces. It'll end up reaching right around 5-6 feet, maybe 7 feet, but it's a great, great dwarf that'll provide a great winter interest. Our next Japanese maple is a snakebark Japanese maple with bright golden bark. The name is Acer rufinerve Winter Gold. Winter Gold gets its name because of this bright golden bark that gives a great winter interest. Winter Gold leaves out in the spring with a bright chartreuse green leaves, really, really large green leaves that turn yellow in the fall. This tree will end up getting right around 12 to 14 feet in height and a semi-cascading habit and provides a great winter interest. And last but not least, we've got an Acer griseum hybrid here. This is another one of those trifoliate leaves. This is a hybrid with Acer nikoense. The unique thing about this one is it's part of the Rochester hybrid group of hybrid paper bark maples. It gets a heavy cinnamon flaking bark, where this maple gets its name, the Cinnamon Flake maple, as it matures. So the bark will have this cinnamon flake peeling appearance that gives her great winter interest. It has this trifoliate leaf in the spring that's a rich green, and it turns to a red in the fall. This is a maple that will definitely add a lot to the winter garden, for sure.
As you can see, there's a lot of diversity in maples for the winter garden. These are just a few of the things we do here at MrMaple.com that can really capitalize that winter garden, get people talking, and get some interest in your garden during a time of the year when normally you don't get out in the garden as much. Really enjoy your garden all 4 seasons with these plants. We went through a full range of diversity of colors here today, and so you can kind of see the full spectrum of just amazing winter interest Japanese maples. Thanks again for watching. I'm Matt, and of course that was my brother Tim Nichols earlier. We appreciate your support, and thanks for watching Mr. Maple video.